Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of Karajan NEWZIK, or if you've been tuned in over the last few days, welcome back to Karajan NEWZIK. My name is Bas Grasmayer. I'll be moderating the next 2 sessions about live streaming. Also on the program this afternoon, if you're in Europe, or this morning if you're in the US, or this evening if you're east of Europe, we will have Netzwerk Junge Ohren, a session between Julia Kaiser, who's moderating, and Nell to talk all about that. We'll have a session about protocols for a better music industry. And then in the evening, we'll have a performance by Sam Aaron doing Sonic Pi. Sonic Pi is a programming language for making music live, really interesting. And for members of the Brain Trust, we'll have a wine tasting and listening session. So be sure to stay on for that. But first, we'll be talking about live streaming, first with Tim Westergren, who's the founder of Sessions. And then in half an hour, we'll have a panel with 2 more speakers. Welcome, Tim. I'm really excited to speak to you. Tim, previously in your career, you founded Pandora, I think for a very long time, the largest music streaming service in the US. Definitely, I think the first to use artificial intelligence based music recommendations. And now you're doing Sessions, which is all about live streaming, just like today's session. Would you like to tell the stream a little bit about what Sessions is?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks for having me on, Bas. Great to be part of this. Sessions is a live streaming platform which allows musicians to perform live to a virtual audience, much like dozens or arguably hundreds of other platforms around the web right now, and then to have an interaction with them, so various forms of engagement. I think what makes Sessions very unique are sort of 2 pieces. One is what we call a growth engine, which is essentially a piece of technology that we built over 10 years ago and that has been sort of optimizing and improving for over a decade, that allows us to acquire fans very efficiently. So it's like an audience acquisition engine. And so we actually, unlike I think any other service around, market every show that we put on. So we spend money in our own growth engine to drive people to show up at the shows. And that's a very, I think, unique part of it. The second piece is the DNA of the company comes out of the gaming industry. So my partners here are a couple of gentlemen who have spent a long time running sort of a successful shop creating free-to-play virtual games. And so their perspective coming into this was gamification and game mechanics. So how do you take those techniques and apply them to a music setting to encourage both engagement and monetization? Because ultimately, the kind of genius of gaming is how well they're able to, create income through ephemeral goods and services. People spend an enormous amount of money on digital goods of various forms, and that's something that's bypassed the music industry. And so we're trying to bring that in to music in the context of a live streaming product.
I think that's really interesting, especially early on. I prepared 3 statements that I was going to ask you to say like true or false or agree or disagree to, and then we can go into detail about them. Yeah. I think I've already marked 2 as answers essentially. But we can still play the game and then kind of go into detail on them. So the first statement is live streaming mostly benefits artists with a sizable fan base and does not help artists find a new audience.
True with a capital T.
And live streaming cannot compete with live music once it returns at full scale.
False.
Live streaming is the best digital source of revenue.
Potentially. I think it has. I think that's true when it's done right. The way it's been done so far, no.
So for you, that's means like microtransactions and experimenting with that. Can you tell a little bit more about how that works on the platform and during streams or around streams?
So there are really two, to my thinking, two pillars of a successful live streaming industry. One, which we'll take for granted, is kind of the features themselves, the capabilities, and that's a generic commodity that a lot of companies offer now: streaming capability and the sort of basic engagement features that most people have: chatting, gifting, and so on. So that's a commodity. Everybody has that. The two things that make this work in tandem is audience and then really effective gamification. And gamification sounds kind of like a trite word, and it's really about creating an environment where the fan is invested and very engaged in the artists, that experience, such that they feel like participating and being part of it. And there are various ways to do that, and one of them is in an exchange of value. So the term of art is tipping, but we think actually tipping is the wrong way to think about it. Tipping is an act of charity. It's really more about patronization and belonging to something. So in much the same way that gamers pay to be part of things, to exchange gifts, to buy gifts, the same thing can be true in a live streaming context. So on sessions, a fan can gift something directly in the form of a digital, we call it giving love on sessions. And there are items, digital items, emojis, icons you can gift to an artist. And they see that come in, of course, as they're playing. And those range in value. You can pay to request a song. You can pay to chat. There are artists that actually have so much demand from audience to engage that they just create a system where essentially by conversing, you're creating your own economic engine. We had an artist not that long ago, in a 45-minute period, had 4,500 people pay to put up a chat on her performance. So the great power of live streaming is the live performance itself, which I would argue is a musician's most valuable asset. It's the one thing that is just so unique. It's the most evocative, most powerful thing. And so ideally a live streaming can harness that and harness the emotion, the impulse that the fan feels in that moment to gift. And of course, that's all worthless if there aren't people there to do it. And although that sounds very basic, that's what's been wrong. I mean, if you look at live streaming, the audiences are anemic, even for large global stars, except for BTS, maybe. The numbers have been very disappointing. And that requires a very sophisticated, advanced approach to marketing. And that's what Sessions is bringing to this. So it's really those two things working in tandem.
I've long thought that music streaming was like kind of on demand or like recommendation-based music streaming. I've long thought that it was like a really good kind of basic layer to have in place. But I never really fully expected it to be like a business model on its own, for artists at least. And I expected sooner or later and actually, to be honest, I expected sooner we'd see a layer on top of that emerge where artists can monetize the relation with their fans. Do you feel that layer is now emerging?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what's happening is, in some ways, COVID kind of was sort of the magic ingredient that brought this all ahead, right? All of a sudden, digital was the only way to perform for your audience. And so I think artists began to really think, wait a minute, I've been doing these digital things, but it turns out I'm not making money on them. So, oh no, we've got to figure that out. We've got to start making money here, basically, because I can't play live. And so there's been an explosion, I think, of innovation, invention, and efforts by platforms to solve that problem. And I think the reason that live streaming has not been successful financially so far is the way it has been conceived of is as essentially a show broadcast over the web. kind of like a pay-per-view almost, and buy a ticket to a show, and you get a concert and you watch it on your computer. That's just not something that a fan is going to pay for in any kind of enduring fashion. So you have artists, if you have a giant audience, you can convert some small percentage of them on any given show and make some amount of money. But you're fundamentally mismatched in terms of, and that has been the standard so far for live streaming. It's a show and you listen. I think the adaptation that has to happen is to think of it differently and think of it as a relationship between an artist and fan that is ongoing and that is multidimensional and that lives on past the performance, and much more like gaming. The same way that a gamer is a member of a guild and is part of an adventure that they go back to, and spend an ungodly amount of time doing and an ungodly amount of money doing. That's really the way we have to think about this for music.
I wanted to ask about that ongoing relationship. So kind of almost as a rule of thumb, or most artists shouldn't look at live streams as like a one-off thing or something they do occasionally, but rather regularly. And I noticed on sessions, there's this concept called crews.
Right.
Can you tell a little bit about that and what that is and kind of what the thinking behind this is?
Yeah, so crew being every fan has the option to become part of an artist's crew and just self-select and join the crew. It doesn't cost anything, but you just declare yourself to be, I am on the crew for a certain artist. Once that happens, the things you do on sessions accrue value to that artist. So the more time you spend, the more money you spend, the more active you are, the more engaged you are. That activity, that sort of fandom, the benefit of that goes to the artists. So in terms of greater stature, financial reward. So it's a way of kind of supporting a musician you want to support. And that's a big part of this, that you're part of an artist's trajectory. And I will, just to make this sort of concrete, when we first started to launch the product, one of the first things we did was we recruited about 150 artists to participate. And these were hobbyists. So no one with any real professional experience, mostly folks just aspiring musicians, been playing at home. And we brought them on the platform, and using the growth engine, we brought them an audience to start off with, kind of like a starter audience. And then we sort of let them have at it. And they began playing regularly, usually weekly, sometimes several times a week, and cultivating a fan base. And it was just remarkable to watch this evolve. And I would say now, of those 150, maybe 30 or so, or 35 maybe, are making a regular, sizable income by playing on sessions. And by sizable, I mean they're making an annual salary that they can live on, and some more. The highest paid musician is a pianist in Romania, makes $700 an hour consistently, playing several hours a week. And that is fundamentally about an audience and a fan kind of coming together, and then the artist understanding how to continue to cultivate a way that, I'm sure you, wherever you live, at some point, a local bar had the musician that played Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday every week. And they knew everybody's name. They knew everybody's favorite song. They knew everybody's favorite drink. They were part of that person's life. And that's what these artists are doing. And to me, that's the thing that gets me excited, because I think this can scale and can become kind of the foundation for a global musician's middle class.
I think that's an interesting point, and something that often goes maybe missing from these discussions. When people say artist, they might mean a very specific type of kind of recording artist.
Right.
And I was curious about this, whether you see this medium, or at least your application for this medium, do you feel it works better for certain types of artists and certain types of genres? I know you have, for instance, a jazz background. I wonder if like I actually don't know whether like the fan dynamics are accommodating for the type of dynamics that you're creating on your platform. And do you have some thoughts about this?
It's a great question, and I do think there are forms of music and forms of performers that are more or less well suited to this. But I don't think that there's a genre that can't thrive on here. If the artist, the performer, is willing to embrace this kind of relationship with a fan base. I actually think jazz and classical could be hugely benefited by embracing this. But I think the idea that you turn on your mic and start playing and then turn it off 45 minutes later is not the model. Like for these musicians that have started to build a fan following, I'd say in an hour-long show, they probably play music about 30 or 40 minutes. The rest of the time, they're actually having a back and forth with their audience. It's a conversation. So if you're willing to do that, I do actually think, and I had a back and forth recently with an opera singer, and you know, he actually has sort of an online audience of people in social media, and he's an interesting personality, and I think he would do very well on the platform, playing music and talking about what he's doing, telling stories, you know, giving context, and giving audience members a chance to interact with him. I think that's there's no that I think can't do it.
And what does the onboarding for new artists look like? Do you call them yourself and like instill like these ideas with them, or do you specifically search out artists that are already like connecting with their communities, or can anyone apply?
Yeah, so we're on a global hunt for artists, and we have an army of people that are doing outreach. We're talking to record labels and management companies and promoters, and we're also just doing broad stroke searches of the web through social media platforms and just trying to make people aware of it. Any artist can apply. And right now we have sort of a curation process where we will audition artists essentially to make sure we feel like they're suitable for the platform. And certainly we are trying to encourage artists that have an existing following to join up. Because if you have a following already, you don't start from the ground. Like, you can really hit the ground running quickly. And I mean, we have artists who have made $300,000 in 1 hour. So it is, and that's not for a superstar artist. I think the first superstar artist to embrace this and do it right is going to be stunned by how it, not just the revenue they drive, but what it does to their fandom.
Yeah, I mean, there's already been these stories of artists, like really major artists, making more in a single live stream than in maybe an entire tour, or even or maybe just the biggest show in a live tour, which then I think, unfortunately, like a lot of the early streams or virtual performances didn't include like merchandise and things like that even. So even as a stream alone, some of these events could compete with a full produced show of merchandise and all those things. So that's very exciting. So like when a artist comes onto the platform, where does this kind of growth engine come into play?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't fully answer your question, but so once an artist is identified and is selected after an audition, then there's an onboarding process where we bring them on board, we set them up, we coach them on how to get the program up and running. We often will send them equipment, actually send them the basic web equipment and streaming stuff, so they can kind of have like a starter kit to do that. And then we'll hit the growth engine button. So they'll set a date and a time for a show, and then we will invest some money in the growth engine to advertise their first performance. And we'll do that in a myriad different ways. But the net of it is that when they start, they don't start with an empty room. They start with people there. So it's a very kind of scalable process that works for artists at any stage.
And you mentioned that you started building that engine 10 years ago. Was this the use case you had in mind?
So I didn't start that engine. Those were my partners. So
Right.
Gordon Sue and Charles Chu, which are the two co-founders with me of this. It was something they conceived of in the context of gaming. And so they spent 10 years evolving that, developing it, and just turning it into this incredible basic capability within gaming. And we had that when we started. And so from the day sessions launched, we've had this growth engine here because it just has the generic capability to bring people to things.
I'm really curious, actually, as someone, so I have somewhat of a background in music streaming myself, or on-demand music streaming.
Okay.
And I'm curious about actually like building the company. How is building a live streaming company different from a music streaming service? Because I imagine it sounds way more like, first of all, based on events, but also maybe based more on the link between the artist and the fan rather than the listener and the catalog. And I'm sure that comes with all kinds of economics and processes and things like that. I'm curious what you find like kind of the biggest or the most stark differences in a live streaming company versus a streaming service.
Yeah, you've phrased that very intelligently, the difference between a fan and artist versus a consumer and a catalog. And I think probably the one thing that jumps out the most at me in terms of the difference is what is the licensing part of this. So when you're a streaming company and you're dealing with pre-recorded content on demand, there's a jungle of licenses that you have to navigate because essentially you need permission from every single rights holder for that content. And that has been the sort of biggest hurdle to digital innovation, for the last 30 years, because it's both been time consuming and complex, and frankly, for many years, unclear, but also economically very difficult. And, there have been so many companies that just couldn't get over the hump of the financial structure for direct licensing. So that's certainly a piece. And then I think the difference between having a relationship with a catalog versus an artist is also enormous in terms of operational side, because you are, like you said, your customer, if you want to call it that, is an artist versus a rights holder. Basically an accountant versus a CTO and a business affairs person versus the artist themselves. So the company, a large part of Sessions' team is actually an artist relations team. And it's about obviously finding artists, recruiting them, auditioning them, but it's also about coaching and developing them on the platform, helping them succeed. So that's a huge part versus, interacting with an inanimate catalog that you're just, connecting through digital wiring into a system so that there's synchronization between databases and things are working. This is a human product. And that's a very different complexion for a company than one dealing with just digital bits and bytes.
And I assume also like the licensing and the costs associated with it. I think by default, as a catalog service, you have like a really high burn rate, and with that comes a certain pressure to grow and develop. Is that the same? Is that just a certain like kind of startup model that will be the same across, like even for a live streaming business, or does that pressure somehow feel different? Yeah,
it feels the same and also different. I mean, licensing, direct music licensing, is like having a pair of hands on your throat, because not only are the economics challenging, you've got a very small number of customers, the major labels, who have complete control over your destiny and can change it whenever they like. And that's a very difficult environment to build a business in. You don't have control over your future. And it's, in some ways, you kind of, you exist by the grace of a small oligopoly. And there's nothing sort of like evil about that. It's just the nature of a very concentrated a business, where 3 labels own 85% of the content people care about. It's very different in this context. We do pay, there is a licensing fee, but it's just a publishing fee that's paid for the performance of a song, the actual performance itself. But this, if you'll forgive me, this to me connects to what I think is a much larger issue that I think musicians have to soberly address, which is musicians are being devalued. I think systematically by the music industry. And the problem is that the music content is consumed through a very small number of companies, and the audience for that music is controlled by a very small number of companies, primarily Facebook, Instagram. And musicians increasingly are being compensated for the ability of their music to drive the value of a different product, primarily advertising, but also subscription. So Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple, YouTube are like, put those together and you've got the bulk of what's happening within music. None of those companies are actually in the music business. They are either in advertising business, the hardware business, or the subscription business. And subscription business is not the music business. It's getting people to pay for something every month, whatever that is. And music is content that's designed to get people to buy, pay for, watch those other things. And so artists are renting their audience and they're not being directly compensated for the value of their work. And that's what I think is why live streaming to me is so important, because it's the antidote to that. It's an environment where it's a human being. You are directly performing in front of them. You're a 3-dimensional living, breathing person, not a track in a sort of an anonymous track in a playlist, or something tucked between advertising pods. And you're 3-dimensional. You're paid directly. So the fan puts $1 in your tip jar, it goes into your pocket with a small fee taken out, but it's essentially in your pocket, versus waiting for a hoped for royalty at some point based on a share of something divided by something, divided by something, divided by something. And I saw an article recently, and musicians who said, my music's all over Spotify. I'm not making any money. Like, why am I doing this? And for some reason, like, the simplicity of that really hit me. That artists are ubiquitous, but they're making less and less money, except for the very top echelon who are thriving. And so the industry needs to reckon with this and figure out where they want to be in 10 years. And they don't want to be that small, the sort of metaphor is that small island of CDs in the back of a Walmart, where the only reason they're there is because people have to walk through the toasters and the refrigerators and the electronics to get to the CD aisle. And that's where I worry it's headed.
Thank you so much for this half-hour chat so far. I want to invite you to stay on, but I have to also move on to the next official panel, the scheduled panel, still about live streaming. And I want to invite on stage or onto the screen Susanna Stefani Caetani, of founder and president of only stage, and Director of Artistic Administration at the International Centre for Contemporary Music in London. And Fiona Livingston of HarrisonParrott, and you were are part of the team that runs that artist management agency's live streaming platform called Virtual Circle. Thank you for joining. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. First, I want to just double check with Tim.
Yep.
Do you have time to stay on a bit longer?
Yeah, I won't be able to stay the whole time, but I'm happy to participate for a little while.
Great.
Nice to meet you, Fiona.
So I'm really curious where everyone sees the live streaming landscape in 5 years or so, and whether you yourself will still be looking at live streaming. So maybe you can make that part of your introductions. I'll kind of go by name of the screens from left to right. So I'll start with Fiona. Please take a moment to introduce yourself and where you see the live streaming landscape 5 years from now, and your role in it, or classical music's role in that.
Sure, absolutely. That's a nice big question to start with. So as Bas said, I'm Fiona. I'm from HarrisonParrott. HarrisonParrott, for those that aren't familiar with it, is an international classical music management agency, and we've been running for over 50 years now. And at the end of 2020, during the pandemic, we launched Virtual Circle, which is a live streaming platform for classical music and the arts. And we also launched this in partnership with two technical partners, Seven Digital, who are a B2B company which provides end-to-end solutions for music streaming, and with NEWZIK, which are an online music shop. So we're in good hands with them on the technical side. I thought it would just be useful just to talk a little bit about Virtual Circle and how maybe it's a bit different, because I think that feeds into your question for how I see things in 5 years' time. So with Virtual Circle, it was very much built with the classical music industry in mind, and very much thinking about artists, venues, orchestras in one camp and the audience in the second camp. So for artists, we really wanted to build a platform which allowed them to communicate their brand in the most effective way. So we allow that to happen via a customizable video page, so they can put their brand on there, their logo, their photographs, they can put text on there and call to action buttons, so they can lead audiences in the way that they want and to create an atmosphere for how they want their concert to be. And we also think it's extremely important to provide artists with multiple monetization avenues, so that they're getting paid for the content which they well deserve to be paid for. So Virtual Circle is a completely paywalled platform. Artists can select whichever ticket price they would like to have, which suits their costs. We also do ticket bundles, so you can match that with merchandise. And also on the platform, because of our relationship with Seven Digital, you can also buy high-resolution download albums. So there's lots of places for artists and venues and orchestras to be able to generate revenue. And from the audience side of things, we really wanted to give them the opportunity to learn more about the artist or orchestra, so that they could sort of start building a fan base digitally for those artists and for that music potentially. And we do that through information buttons provided by the client, by social media buttons, of course. But we also have an interactive chat feed, which is moderated by the artist themselves sometimes, or orchestra members, or a journalist, or somebody from the venue or festival themselves who is knowledgeable and excited and interested in the content that is being shown. And we think it's really important that audiences have a place where they can communicate with somebody during a live stream performance. So it's not a sort of a completely passive experience. If somebody wants to just watch the concert themselves, then that is absolutely fine. But a lot of people want to have some interaction. So we feel like a chat feed with knowledgeable and interested people on the other side is really important. And the other feature that we have, which is quite fun, is we have this animated button, which looks like two hands clapping, and you click this animated feature and it sends up little animated claps up the side of the screen, so that, you know, audiences can share their appreciation and their enjoyment of the concert they are watching. So really our kind of main aim with Virtual Circle is to support artists and venues and orchestras to produce innovative and exciting content which is specific for the digital concert environment, to be able to monetize and to be able to communicate their brand effectively, and for audiences to feel involved in the performance so that they have a really positive digital experience. So I think sort of leading from those things, where I see things in 5 years' time is that live concerts, live stream concerts will be very much part of artists and orchestras and venues' main strategy moving forward into the future. I feel very much at the moment, or at least in 2019, it was always a sort of plan B or a plan C. It might have had an educational aspect to it, or was there just to facilitate ticket sales, or was there just to have maybe a short interview? Like, it was very much a secondary consideration. Whereas I think now, with the technologies open to us, and the fact that everybody's had to adjust so quickly, audience and classical music wise, to experiencing live music, it will really become part of that strategy moving forward, especially when live concerts, you know, in real life concerts happen again. I don't think it means that digital is just going to drop off again. I really feel like the exposure that artists and orchestras will have had globally, like through reaching global audiences via their digital streams, they will want to keep that going, because it helps to diversify your audience. It's inclusive, it breaks down barriers, and why would you want to lose that? So I feel like it's going to be extremely important for the future of classical music in generating those additional revenue channels, which is extremely important. And also, I think we'll see much more content which is being made specifically for digital audiences, rather than just sort of having a concert hall, a quartet playing and one still camera in a room. We're going to see much more elaborate, I think, performances, you know, including things like imagery and movement and color and location, to be able to provide a visual experience as well as a good listening experience for audiences. So that's sort of how I see the landscape evolving.
Thank you. I've already noted down a few things that I want to kind of put to the panel. That's, by the way, if I'm like looking down, I'm not looking at my mobile phone or something. For you to know, for the viewers to know, I'm like making notes the old way. Susanna, I'm curious to hear about your perspective, as well as like the All About Bach Festival, and your switch to live streaming and experiences with live streaming so far, and where you see that going beyond the pandemic.
So, good afternoon. I'm Susanna. My company is Only Stage. I'm also Director of Artistic Administration of a new institution in London, which advocates exclusively for contemporary music. So I think that this is the point at the end. So we have now years where we are here working for performers in classical music, and we have abandoned that figure, which was the romantic figure, to have the instrumentalist and composers. So I think that's the point today. So live streaming gives us the chance to revitalize and to renew completely our perspective in regarding of classical music. So I feel more and more that repertoire is the point. So we can speak about strategies, we can speak about tools, musicians, but at the end, we are here for music. So that's the point. We have out there an enormous amount of repertoire that nobody knows. Simply. So classical music is still something unknown. We cannot really fight properly with what is instead popular music. Tim was very interesting before, because he was speaking about songs. So what he's referring are musicians that are creating in the moment. So this is what was for us classical music 200 years ago. Now we are here with performers. So the the picture is completely another one. And especially now that I find, like Fiona said, that live streaming is such a chance for classical music to reposition it really completely different, have future. I think this is one of the strategic things. For example, we did All About Bach Festival. We offer to the public because at that moment, with the pandemic, we needed to support our artists. So I thought instead to be a manager, to be an impresario, and say, look, we have to do something here all together. If not, we will not survive. And the decision has been to put all of them on the same composer. And we say, look, if you are going to a mass, you don't pay a ticket. And if you have to listen to Bach, why you should pay something for that? So, which is probably from a business point of view, absolutely not the point here. But we have also to form a public out there. And I think the success I had with that small season of 9 concerts is exactly that. So to find a repertoire, the right one. So I don't believe that live streaming can be like a live season. So when you are in the classical music business, you have a certain mechanism, where an orchestra has a subscription season and does that season in a way which the marketing business philosophy, all that. But going stream, this is totally different. You cannot really bring the same type of concert into this type of public, because if you speak for example, if you speak with a 15 years old who is there on Spotify, on YouTube or whatever, suddenly he could jump perhaps in Vivaldi Fourth Season, and he could be very happy to have conquered that music, but he will not speak with me about Antonini or the other instrument, or if it's a modern instrument or if it's an old instrument. So out there we have something which is totally new for us. And we have to really find a way to put all this together and to come out from our shell in a different way. So I hope it wasn't too long and not too passionate.
No, that was great. I think also interesting points about it being basically it being a long-term form of media to which classical music maybe can adjust. I think actually, I wonder if maybe this is a question for you, how you would compare it maybe to recorded music entering classical music, or classical music becoming a format for recorded music long ago, like a century ago. Do you think this might be a similar...
I think so. So we are here in front of a revolution. I mean, when you think, you had Gershwin, you had Bernstein, you had many of them at that time. They were composer and performer. Exactly. If we are speaking now about Ed Sheeran or Beyoncé, the numbers, what they earn, okay, is that music? Instead here, we have thousands of performers that are doing the music of 200 years old composer, so no revenue in terms of royalties. So Tim was absolutely right. Perhaps one of the very good way could be engaged public to them, because of them as performer, about the repertoire they are doing, which could be quite an interesting solution for classical music performer. But on the other side, I think this is the occasion to look at contemporary music too, finally, and not just to be contemporary music, but just to consider music as something that is alive and has to continue to have its development as it does in other type of music. So, I mean, referring to the classical music one. I hope my answer was proper.
Yeah, thank you. I've been making notes. I will circle back to some of these points. I wanted to make sure that I asked this question about the next 5 years for live streaming also to Tim, and how you see the landscape. And particularly, I'm curious, so China quite famously has quite a different digital music infrastructure where music streaming, as well as like micropayments are maybe spread out over various services, but somehow there's some link between them, or they're somehow integrated. Do you see, Tim, live streaming somehow better integrate with the general music streaming or digital music landscape over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the upside scenario for live streaming 5 to 10 years from now is that it's created a whole new venue for music, and that venue has a few different characteristics to it. One is it's always on, it's 24/7, it's completely unlimited in its capacity. Second, it doesn't. The shows themselves can be large or small. There's no kind of precondition for that, or the size of the audience, the size of the genre, and whatnot. And the third is there's a really, really efficient way for money to change hands at those events, and the money goes directly into the hands of the people performing. And just to connect it to the conversation we're having right now, I played in bands when I was a kid. I spent my 20s playing in rock bands and traveling around the United States. And I'd say for every city we were in, there might have been 15 rock clubs. If you were lucky, there was one jazz club. And every 10 towns, there was one classical venue. So I think one of the problems that live streaming solves is expansion of venues for classical music, right? If you think it's competitive to book yourself as a rock band into a local club, try booking your classical performance. It's 10 times or 100 times more difficult. So I do think in an upside scenario, it could be, I wouldn't say complementary, I would say much larger and much more remunerative for musicians than the existing business. And I think musicians are going to leave that business and come to live streaming if digital music continues to pay them the way it does now, because it won't make any financial sense for your music to be on Spotify or YouTube or whatnot if you're not getting paid for it. What's the point?
Yeah, I want to open up, by the way, I don't want to be like the bit of sounds in between all the speakers. So if you want to ask each other something directly or go right away off of something someone else said, please go ahead.
I'm curious as to Fiona, how you're driving audience to all these events you guys are hosting.
Sure. Yes. So it's quite a marketing challenge, of course, especially with the digital landscape as it is, because, if you really think about it, we're not just, live classical music performances aren't just competing with other live music platforms. They're competing with YouTube. You're competing with Netflix. You're competing with all of these digital entertainment. I hate using that word, but entertainment, facilities online that everybody has at the touch of a button and can look at whenever they want. So it is a challenge to be able to promote your classical music concert online in the most effective way possible. So for us, we focus a lot on, of course, social media advertising and social media organic posts through our own channels, but also heavily utilizing the artists. I think what we found in particular is that unlike maybe a more traditional in real life venue where the venue would take on a lot of that, well, pretty much all of that responsibility for promoting that concert, or if you're an orchestra, the orchestra would do the majority of that. For online, it really is a huge collaborative and combined effort, just because of the mass of people that you need to be able to try and reach to convert those into ticket sales. So we work very closely with any orchestras or artists or venues that we work with on the platform to be able to make sure that we are all covering particular areas so that we can get the reach that we need, whether that's through organic social media, through the artist, through paid social media, through paid Google search ads and display ads, making sure that we're on all the listing sites that we need to be on across the world, depending on where your live stream can be easily seen, and also making sure that, of course, we have enough features in all the music places as well, all the regular magazines, because of course what we found is that even though we are reaching so many new audiences, particularly younger audiences as well, so many more of them are watching online than they would be than what we've seen in the concert halls, which is absolutely fantastic to see and something that we should all be absolutely capitalizing on. We don't want to isolate that more traditional audience either. So, we still have that presence in the music magazines and things like that. But we really work very much by using the orchestra or the artist network, by contacting places where they have performed before, so that to do some reciprocal marketing. That has been a big thing for us, to try and basically let everyone to work together to make this a success for classical music. This isn't just silos anymore. I think the silo attitude that a lot of us had before the pandemic of this is just my venue and I'm only going to do what I can for my venue has really been massively diminished since the pandemic, and everyone's realized that we really are all in this together for the future of classical music, and to make sure that it survives and evolves and continues to evolve and to be exciting, just like Susanna was saying, with new programming. It's so important, and this is a fantastic opportunity to be able to do that, where we don't have those boundaries imposed on us anymore, that we can experiment and we can introduce new composers, contemporary composers, and new artists as well, to try and reach into those new younger markets as well, trying to reach people who may not have even thought about classical music as something they were interested in, but the digital concert hall sort of takes down that barrier for them, because they can try it and see if they like it from the kind of comfort of their own home. But I would say, sort of leading on from the kind of marketing side of that, is that it's really important that the actual concert that you're putting out there isn't just a sort of recreation of a concert hall. It's not just one single camera in a room in a concert hall pointing at an orchestra and that's all it's doing. When you're in your own home, and I'm sure many of us have watched content online from home over the last year, you need something a bit more visually stimulating. It is a different experience. So how I view it is that you're not recreating the classical music concert hall, because you can't do that. You can't recreate that human to human interaction and that atmosphere, but it's about replacing it with something new. That adds another dimension, another element to this experience that they're going to be having for classical music. And I think that's a really important thing for generating new audiences and breaking down barriers, is that showing, look, we're not bringing that potentially preconceived idea of a stale concert hall into your home. We're bringing something in that has imagery, that has movement, that has an interesting location, that has extra content as well. And that's another opportunity that digital concerts does for us. We can have behind the scenes footage, we can have Q&As, we can have interviews, we can have kind of storytelling to kind of embellish all of these things that are around the concert that you would not get in the concert hall. You might read it in your program notes, but you're not going to see the artist, so you actually see more of the artist and understand more of what is happening through a digital concert experience, and that makes it even better to market, because you have more material to put out there, and to be able to say, look, if you watch this, you're going to see all these things. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, sorry to interrupt you. I know Tim has to run. I just want to check if that's now or not.
I'm straight after Scoot. I'm sorry, but enjoyed the conversation. And
it's nice to meet you, Tim.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to meet you. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So here we are again. I think, Fiona, we have to be sincere to each other. I don't think that classical music has never done very well in terms of ticket sales. So we are supported. It could be from the state, it could be from government, it could be from fantastic sponsorship. So we are not that type of business. So in effect, now with the digital new path, it opens to us, something which can be very scary, because we have not that public outside that can support us entirely. So I feel that, for example, if I'm back to repertoire, there is a certain type of repertoire we cannot be really pay for itself, but has a social duty to be recognized and experienced. So I think that in that part of what will be live streaming in the next 5 years, I think the governments have a huge possibility to support these, as they do for schools, for example, when they do, but in the same way. So there is a part of established repertoire that needs absolutely that type of supporting. And Yes, now I'm back. And on the other side, instead, we can really experiment new chances for the new repertoire, and there get some sort of autonomous profile that we don't have now yet. Oh, I think I have a trouble. Yeah. Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Oh, but maybe you cannot hear us. All right, I have a question then for Fiona while we wait for Susanna to get back. So I thought it was interesting what you said about reaching new audiences. So I previously worked in for a classical music streaming service, and what we noticed was that a lot of new people were coming to the genre actually through these like relaxing piano playlists and things like that on Spotify. That's admittedly don't get a lot of respect in the classical music industry, but I think are an important funnel for feeding new people into classical music. And then of course there's the history of orchestras and musicians finding new audiences, like in real life. Against the Grain Theatre, who's speaking here on Friday, doing a session, Canadian opera company. They've done phenomenal work with that. And I'm really curious how you think about, how do you get a live stream, under the eyes of audiences that maybe hadn't considered listening to classical music or don't have, or are not aware that they have an affinity? How do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. And I think it's something, from my perspective anyway, that classical music has always had to really raise the bar against, really, because we don't appear in, sort of pop videos and things like that. So it's always been a struggle in that sense. And I think it is more so with live streaming, because as Susanna said, like, you don't have that visibility of a concert hall that people can walk past and come to as a destination. It's a very different kind of mentality. But I think it's really making use of our sort of pathfinding tools that we have. And as you mentioned, Spotify is a great tool for people to be able to kind of stumble upon and discover classical music from these playlists. And that's a really great gift in a way from Spotify. But also I was thinking about YouTube and Facebook and these things. And I know that, of course, they have not been specifically built with the music industry in mind. They are what they are. They're advertising platforms, and they want to push you to various bits of content. But actually, if you use them cleverly enough, they can be fantastic tools to, put your content under the nose of people who may not be aware of it. Susanna back. No? Yes.
Great. Welcome back, Susanna.
I'll continue.
Yeah, please continue.
So I was going to say with YouTube in particular, I think it's really interesting because particularly over the pandemic last year, we saw a lot of people doing free live streams on YouTube and on Facebook Live, there was just this mass kind of almost like a panic, really, in a way, of being able to push out content as frequently and as much as possible. And some of it was fantastic and really innovative and creative and fun, and some of it wasn't quite that good. And I think we learned a lot from that. And I think a lot of people kind of realized that, okay, maybe we can use YouTube to kind of, do a short trailer about a concert that's coming up, or about our orchestra, or about this artist. The artist could talk about other projects that they're doing, or their album that they're doing. You could have some more interviews with that artist, and start pushing those out there. And then, they can, with all the metadata programming you can do, that can start to kind of appear on people's recommendation feeds. You could use YouTube adverts as well, of course, if you have the budget for that. But there are ways, I think, from using YouTube and, of course, with social media, by putting ads out there. You don't have to target specifically your list. You can do the lookalike audiences, and you can do so many various bits of programming on Facebook ads to be able to target people who might have an interest in what you're trying to show. So I think we just need to kind of think a bit more creatively about the platforms that are already already existing to be able to kind of surface our live stream content in new and different ways. And I do think that YouTube could be really interesting for that, because, you know, a lot of orchestras and venues have, you know, quite large followings, you know, for classical music numbers on YouTube. And it's sort of a little bit heartbreaking when you go on there and you see a whole kind of 90-minute program for free on YouTube. And you just think, you know, that could have been put maybe behind a paywall or onto a subscription platform to at least have generated some money to cover those costs. Maybe they could have put a short segment or one piece of music on YouTube to be able to gather interest and then have the kind
here
of
we
YouTube...
are, back again.
Hello.
So great.
Welcome back.
So,
hello.
I just want to clue Susanna in, and then we can continue the conversation.
Sure.
Hello.
So, Susanna, can you hear us? There still seems to be an issue. I want to ask, like, our backstage technician, maybe to suggest, maybe she cannot hear us, maybe to let her know this. We have just under 15 minutes left. I do want to allow some room for Q&A from the audience. If you're streaming this from anywhere, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. One question coming in is from Ralph Talmans. I'll add it here on the stream. I don't know if this is exactly the right panel. We do have a panel in 45 minutes about protocols for the music industry, for which this question is perfect. Fiona, do you have something to say regarding NFTs as a funding mechanism for new artists, or is this a topic you haven't considered?
I have to admit, I mean, I've not worked with NFTs myself, and I've not worked with them yet on Virtual Circle. But I obviously have heard about the Beeple's art sale through Christie's. And I did watch actually your session a couple of days ago on the role of NFTs. And I mean, even though I'm no expert on this, but I think it could be an extremely interesting way of artists again having a more direct income stream through their content that they're putting out there. So it kind of cuts out all of these middlemen and places where their kind of revenues can get sort of siphoned away. So I think from that point of view, I think it could be really interesting. And I'm kind of looking to see how that's going to evolve in the classical music industry, and how that can kind of help artists to maintain more control over their music, over their content, over their rights, and again, how they can manage that revenues. But yeah, I can't really talk in more detail about NFTs, I'm afraid.
What type of music do you feature on Virtual Circle, or rather musicians? Is it just the HarrisonParrott musicians, or also others? Sure.
So no, it's not just for HarrisonParrott or our sister company Polyarts musicians. It is absolutely for any classical or world arts musician, orchestra, venue, festival who need to have a live streaming platform to be able to stream their concerts. So to give you an example of content that we've had so far, we've had Pierre-Laurent Aymar with a piano recital of Beethoven and the Avant-Garde. We've had Klaus Markler and the Oslo Philharmonic Orchestra with a celebration of Sibelius on Sibelius's birthday. We've also have a partnership with Manchester Camerata. We have a series of 3 or 4 concerts with them, and we had our first one with them last month, which was a great success with Jess Gillum and Pekka Kusisto, with a really great program, including Nyman's Where the Bee Dances, which was just exhilarating. And we've also had concerts from Japan with the Bach Collegium Japan, and we have a concert coming up with them in April with a St. Matthew's Passion. So we really have quite a diverse range of kind of chamber orchestra, full symphony, recital, and we're actually in conversations at the moment with a music festival as well, a chamber music festival, to be able to stream their concert. So we really are open for really anyone in the classical world or world music who would like to stream their content. We are here to help and to facilitate that.
Another question I saw coming in, and I realize you might know the answer to this given what you've been saying about looking at audiences for advertising. Do you have a picture of how large a proportion of your audience listens to classical music exclusively?
Yes, exclusively. Oh, yes. So I don't know about being exclusively, but I do kind of get from the data that we've had so far. I mean, please bear in mind, we only launched in December, so we've only had about 8 concerts. So it's not quite enough to get the fullest picture. But yeah, I mean, sort of demographics wise, I'd say that our audience is pretty much split 50-50 between the kind of 50 plus and sort of, the kind of 18 to 45 kind of age groups. And we do find that particularly through our Facebook advertising, what we do is we try and look alike the audiences that follow Jess Gillam, for example. So we target Jess Gillam's followers who may not only like classical music because, she's a saxophonist. So we may be targeting people who like saxophone music or jazz, or who like Michael Nyman's music, who's obviously done a lot of film music. So we're kind of reaching people who like different facets of classical music, or kind of reaching classical music in different ways, or jazz music. So really kind of through those so advertising, we're able to kind of go beyond just the sort of core classical music fan base, but actually trickling out through into audiences that mimic aspects of those of like Jess Gillam's audience, for example, so that we can actually start to reach further and further into audiences that like film music, or who like jazz, or who like saxophone. So I don't know like the exact percentage proportion, but I do know that it's not 100% exclusive like classical music audiences who are watching us, that it is sort of starting to build up and grow with audiences who may not have, be a devout following for Oslo Philharmonic, for example, but who may love Finnish music, and have an affinity to that. So it is growing for sure. Absolutely.
I'm very sorry, but my Wi-Fi has totally died.
Oh, no.
So we were speaking about technology. Could you imagine if it would have happened in a concert? So in a live streaming concert, I think that's a bit of a disaster. So, anyway,
I'm happy.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you back.
So I have solved with my mobile now. I think it's not optimal, but anyway, something.
That's great. We're happy to have you back. Luckily, I want to ask you another question. We have just about 5 minutes left. I'll ask you another question. Then we have one more question from the audience, and then I think we'll wrap up. Susanna, we were talking with Fiona about kind of the discovery element, like how do you attract new audiences? People in classical music, I mean, it's such a hot topic. I think we actually this year do not have a panel about finding new audiences or like the next generation of classical music fans, but basically this topic comes up all the time. Now, in a completely digital environment, how do you think about getting your live streams in front of audiences who maybe do not consider themselves as having a lot of affinity for classical music necessarily, like new audiences, or how do you get new audiences curious about the genre and about the music?
As I told you before, and probably because I have my past as an artist, I'm fixed about music in itself. So I believe a lot into the language, which at the end of the day, when we're speaking about business, sometimes we could be tempted to forget. What I really find important here is to find a way to have really an impact. So to believe in what we are doing and having the opportunity to have an impact on the public. I think that the suggestion that Tim was giving us before, which is at the end of the day, is an old secret, is to involve public. I have to tell you, and I think Fiona agrees with me, that sometimes classical musicians are not the best in opening themselves to the others. So the type of life that they're doing is such an isolated one because they have to be really convinced of themselves, that they have to really find the strengthness, that they need that isolation, which is not exactly what we need here. So here we need really to give the other be participant and to discover how much music can really change life to everybody. I think that the pandemic time we had it, where museums and especially concert halls have been shut down, has changed a lot. Even during the Second World War, something like that has never happened, because music really has that sense to keep people alive. When you think that Shostakovich had his Seventh Symphony world premiere under the bombs, it wasn't a problem. And today it would be. And music needs this courage, needs this openness to have an impact, an historical impact. So that's our mission. I sincerely hope that there will be also a change in our way to think about the business and to find again what is really the sense of all this. If not, we continue to produce new performers, new musicians, new everything, but it's not what the people outside is asking us, because they don't care at the end. They have still to discover what for us is normal and for them is not. So it's a huge task, and I think, and I'm totally convinced, that technology is our chance. So we have here really the chance to reposition music in another way, not just a small last number into our government's initiative.
Thank you. I think that's a really inspiring point. We're going to have to wrap up. I want to very quickly or very briefly still allow for one question from the audience, which I'll feature on screen now, which is directed to Fiona from the Kammer Ensemble Consonance. How do you get chosen to be presented on Virtual Circle? And please really briefly, because I want to be mindful for the next panel. I'll
be really briefly, don't worry. Yes, so basically, if you could just email us, or you can email me, fiona.livingston@harrisonparrott.co.uk, and just tell us about yourselves, what your program is, and how you want to achieve that program, and then we can start a conversation with you and to see if we can work together. It's as simple as that.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the technical issues, Susanna. I wish we could have heard a little bit more from you. I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you in the future, and maybe on the Karajan Music Tech Brain Trust Slack channels.
Okay, pleasure. I'm at disposal.
Great. I want to call on stage Julia Kaiser, who will introduce her own panel. After that, we will talk about protocols for a better music industry, have a performance where someone will, through a programming language, live code music, and there will be a wine tasting session for members of the Karajan Music Tech Brain Trust that I previously mentioned. Julia, welcome on stage.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Bas. Thank you for introducing and handing over to me, because actually your panel gave me the perfect introduction, because we just spoke about, or we just heard about how to integrate audiences into the streaming or into the music world. And in fact, our panel will now be about outreaching to new audiences. And I invite on stage Alexander von Nell from the Netzwerk Junge Ohren, young ears. Young ears, that does not necessarily mean only young listeners, but it's also addressing young listeners or people providing music for young listeners. Hello, Alexander.
Hi, thanks for having me. Just a little thought on young ears. It's not just for young audiences. I just learned that the ears are the part of body that grows until you die. So ears are the part where you are remaining young anyway.
Okay, that's absolutely true. Also, our hearing system develops until we basically die, and it substitutes all the time when we injure it. And so it's a completely fascinating topic, in fact, which we might want to leave to another panel and now just speak about the network, because it's not connecting ears, actually, it's connecting minds.
Right, it's connecting minds. In Germany, we talk about Musikvermittlung a lot, which is not really translatable to another language, not even to English. It's a bit like Weltschmerz. In German, it's also a problematic term because it covers a lot of ideas. It covers music education, it covers outreach, and it also covers all parts of audience development. So we have a little problem with this term ourselves, which is why we coin Musikvermittlung as music in tune with society. So that is all about connecting music and music life to the society and to a broader scope of audiences.
That broader scope of audiences, also the broader scope of musicians or of outreachers. We just heard from the other panel, musicians sometimes are not very good at speaking with words rather than speaking through music. So it's nice to have people accompanying musicians who are better with words. And that's what I find so interesting in that network, which I am part of as well, because it's a brain trust. We have the brain trust backstage now. It's a brain trust for people who are interested in music, interested in passing music on, interested in creating new ideas about music and about music programs, and like to work with each other. And that's basically the point. It's not my idea, my way, and I hope nobody will steal it. It's rather spreading out, helping each other, and then coming to totally different stages of mind.
That's completely correct. The network isn't limited to musicians. It contains of musicians. It also includes directors. It includes pedagogues. It includes also administrators of classical music. We have a lot of bigger institutions in our networks, starting from the Berliner Philharmonics to the BR Symphony Orchestra. We reach out to Austria and Switzerland as well. So we include all German-speaking countries in the network.
The network speaks to music or includes music who actually are working directly with people. So it's firstly speaking not so much a pure network, a pure online networking program, but it has very much advantage to do the things online, also to reach out, because the conversation thing opened at least last year much more to hop into meetings that are anywhere in Europe, where you can connect ideas that are not around in your county, because usually the network is ordered in counties or cities. So, and how far is it growing, or is the network just getting more vivid?
Well, we are in a very interesting moment right now for working as a network. We have one foot in the analog world and another foot in the digital world. As you already mentioned, in earlier days, we had 8 different regions where we went twice a year to do workshops with people who are connected to the network. that wasn't possible when the pandemic hit last year. So we just shifted all these kind of workshop work to digital spaces. We used Zoom for that. And that was extremely helpful because people weren't able to connect on the normal platforms like conferences and things like that. And now they had the opportunity to just get in contact, stay in contact, and exchange ideas on how to proceed in this very problematic time, how to proceed with their work, how to reach out to school classes, for instance, who weren't in schools at that days, or who actually didn't return to schools, most of them. So they just exchanged ideas on how to work on digital platforms with the school classes.
Could you give further examples of the work that can happen online as well? Because I think in the end, everybody and every music teacher and everybody who's doing outreaches will be very happy to go back to making live music directly to people whom he's introducing it to, or she. Because right now we're speaking about school projects or programs for very young listeners, and they are probably first listeners who need to be introduced to music making, to classical music, maybe not even to differentiate between the genres, maybe just to the fascination of music in the first hand, and that can barely happen online only.
True. But it can be fostered through ideas that are brought to them online. We are doing a quite interesting project called Klangradar. I'm not sure whether I can share links. Can I share it somehow?
Of course.
Just links to a website or to YouTube, actually. Write in private chat. All right, I write in private chat, and you'll see it on your on your screens, I think.
Yes,
you go?
And Magic Nicola in the background will
Fantastic.
now share it on the screen. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Nikolai. That is just a little trailer we produced for the project called Klangradar. It's in German, so but most of them is music anyway, so you'll understand it. Where you can get an idea on how we work with school children. And the work we do is just like trying to think about sounds and rearranging sounds to music give me a second, all right. Rearrange sounds to music to do real composition with sounds that occur in just normal life. There it is. Have a look at it after the panel. So what we did when the pandemic hit is we enabled the school. No, I don't want to play it now because it's 5 minutes long. It's just background information for the viewers. We enabled the groups, the school groups and the teachers to work on WhatsApp groups and other things like that to co-create music there. And then we put it together in a big show, like a film show, a movie, and brought together like 6 school classes from all over Germany in this show. And that worked quite fine, actually. We had like over 500 listeners to this show, which we wouldn't have reached in analog world, of course.
Fiona Livingston from HarrisonParrott just introduced her music program, Virtual Circle, that online music program. She said audiences can interact and can push buttons and clap hands and so on and so forth, which that sounds really playful, but is it working for somebody who's listening to music for the first time, so who's not aware of the concert business, or to able to compare it to a real situation, like remembering having been in a live concert themselves?
That's a really interesting question, because what we learned over the last year in our work with the network is the digital space is working quite nicely for quite a lot of things, but we do actually have questions on creating the feeling of nearness or something with people in the digital space. And also the digital space doesn't really give us an idea of a space. There's no sound effects that are normally created by a space. It's just, it's actually it's just 2D, not 3D. So that is a big question we try to raise in our network and try to find solutions for it. Maybe we can talk a bit about the award we are giving out. It's called the Junge Ohren Prize.
Yes.
And we put the pandemic situation as an opportunity for us to rethink this award completely, actually, and to redesign it as a project prize for digital formats. And what we really centered in this award is the question, or we raised various questions with this award. And one of the questions was, how can digital be not only just like a copy of analog, but how can digital be a real additional value to the analog world? I have actually no answer to that question, but I'm really excited what the people who are going to present their project in this award will answer that question.
Maybe you can tell a bit more about the award, because what it was beforehand was an award for outstanding projects of music education / outreach / connecting new audiences to classical music. But it was always demanded to be connected to a school or to a public education system. And so it connected private ideas to the official education world. This has shifted now, because ideas come in from all over, and probably it's an idea to just say, okay, if we deinstitutionalize the whole thing, then maybe the findings or the interesting ideas we can help developing, they can be freer.
Yeah, the award is still very much focused on projects that have some kind of outreach aspects or educational aspects to them. But what we did was just to open up the possibilities to bring the projects to the award. And we also thought about a catalog of criteria which we presented to the people who are interested in bringing their projects to the award. In this catalog of criteria, we have like 4 major columns that are in the core of the award, and these columns are digitality as a dimension of artistic work. That means, how is the digital technology intertwined with the artistic goals of the project? And what is the additional value of digitality to the project? Or questions like, which artistic ventures are used in or are taking use of digital technology? That is the first column. The second column is the idea of digital participation. Like, how is the digital side of this project, how can it make the project or the classical music more accessible to audiences? How is the project working with hierarchies? Is it using hierarchies between the artistic idea and the audience, or is it able for the audience to get in dialogue with the artistic project? And is the digital technology a barrier for possible audiences? That means, for instance, the Clubhouse problematic, that only people with Apple devices can use Clubhouse. That would be a barrier. The third column is innovation. That means, how is this project able to bring in new perspectives? Is it inventing new instruments? And that also means musical instruments. Is it creating new networks? Is it does it use new networks, also interdisciplinary networks? And the fourth column is transfer. Is this is the project exemplary for use? Can it made scalable for others? And can the tools that are invented in this project be used by others? That is more or less in the core of the new award.
Can it be used by others? You mean, can it be like a prototype where others can build upon to? Because sometimes the connection is, say the project is so valuable because it's happening in that moment, in that area, in that community. It can't really be transferred to somewhere else, but there it's working so well. So I think what I find so interesting in the network is that everybody is doing exactly what fits their audiences in that time they're working in. So the individuality, I fear, gets a bit lost if you say it's scalable or it's transferable to any other place.
No. Scalability or transferability is very much in the core of network and of our network as well, because the network is a learning complex. Yeah, the network in itself, or the Netzwerk Junge Ohren, profits if one of the persons who is part of the network can help us with ideas, and that is what I mean with scalability. Can we learn from the project we are getting through the award? Can we, for instance, and learn how to make space, space.
Oh, right now I couldn't really hear, and I hope that is only my line that works not so well. What you were saying, but it's maybe I'd like to go away a little bit. I might want to go away a little bit from the award and back to the network. Why should I personally, or why should anybody just say, okay, that's a network for me? Although I'm not a music teacher, although I'm not a musician, maybe I'm an entrepreneur, maybe I'm providing streaming.
Here, you're freezed on your screen, but okay. I think I grasped your question, and I just keep on talking. So, okay. You're back now.
Okay, so, because you were gone the moment before. Sorry, people out there. I hope you're having a kind of fun on our mimicking to each other. So the idea is basically, why should I be, although I am a member already, why should anybody want to become a member of the Netzwerk Junge Ohren? Whom is it for, and whom do you want?
Well, it's actually for everybody that is interested. Everybody that is interested in a dialogue with society through music. That is, as I said before, that could be a musician, that could also be the intendant of a concert house, or whatever. And what we do in the network is like bringing people together, trying to find out who shares interests with another person in the network, trying to bring together people who can fruitfully work together, things like that. And well, in the center of the network is the idea of, let's call it outreach, let's call it dialogue with society through music.
Because then the panel after us will be working, will be speaking about protocols for a better music industry. We are sort of preparing audiences that later on will be, maybe buying CDs, maybe buying tickets to go into concerts. So maybe customers of the music industry. So we are preparing the landscape for them with the Netzwerk Junge Ohren. What would you suggest the music industry to do to help spreading the Netzwerk Junge Ohren?
I didn't quite get the whole question, I think, but I tried to guess. The music, for us, the music industry is one of the most important parts of music life anyway, because through them, we can enable people to listen to music at home, to relive the events they had when visiting a concert hall or a music theater. So they are in one of the most, or they are an important part of music life for us, and we are happy that we have one of the big players, the Bundesverband Musikindustrie, in our network structure anyway. So that was maybe the question, or
it was going into that direction.
Okay.
In fact, because the next panel will be about the new strategies for music industry, or about where the music business is going. That was spoken about in the panel before us. So what would you say, where is music participation, music partnership, where's the sharing of the joy in music, where is that going from here after a world where we could basically enjoy only online music events? Is it going back to the same normal than before, or do you want the network to be more focused on digitalization?
I think we are not going, or we definitely not going back to the normal we had early in 2020. We definitely will have both sides in our idea of outreach, and both sides, I mean the analog world and the digital world, because I think the most important part is to make people interested in music and art form. Where we do that, whether we do it through digital devices, whether we have them experiment with their mobile phones on sounds they are creating on their table at home, or with the water glass they are playing with, or whatever, and creating sounds and transferring that into a music, into a real composition, because going from sound to music to a composition is quite a way. Or whether they are going out having a real concert experience in a concert hall, that are two sides of the same medal. I mean, and we need to see both sides, because if we just ignore one side, we will lose people.
I have the same problem, in fact, as you. I only hear parts of what you are saying, so it's. I hope it's fun, at least for the people who are listening and who are watching us, because we're both terribly sorry, and we don't know which line is the one that's a little bit cracky. For the future, Alexander, what do you wish a pari situation of live, active music making experience and digital outreach or views into the world? Do you want more digital, more actual music making live experience with all senses? What's best?
I don't know what's best. I think we are on a way. If you look at the digital experiences they are doing in theaters right now, this looks very much like Atari screen in the early 90s. So that's definitely not, well, it's state of the art, but it's definitely not the end of a way, or at the end of a road, or like excellency. But I think it is really important for us as administrators of art to remain curious and to walk all these paths that are lying in front of us. And one of the paths we are seeing is definitely the digital world.
I would like to pass the digital world on now to Matthias Röder. Famous last words from Alexander von Nell. What would you like to say about the Netzwerk Junge Ohren, about the Netzwerk Junge Ohren Preis? Anything we are missing out? Otherwise, then I would pass the microphone on.
Well, thanks for having me here at Karajan Music Tech, and I'm really interested in get in contact with you all and just try to network or try to use networks to just exchange ideas and try to find new paths of, well, opening up music.
Thank you so much for being here, Alexander. Thanks for introducing us to the world of networking and the world of networking for the future. And I pass the networking for the future on to Matthias Röder. Matthias, what do you say? Where's the future of music making? Is it in the net? Is it in the network? Is it live? Is it physical in the same room, or is it all in our laptop?
Oh, those are a lot of options. I think it all starts here, and then you need a lot of people to make it happen. And thank you for talking with Alexander about this very interesting network. I think the networks are really the future, and so this is, in a way, the red thread throughout the whole conference is the networks that make this happen. Thank you, Julia, and I'll take over from here. Thanks.
Hello. Matthias, I think that you are muted, actually.
Was I talking all the time and you couldn't hear me?
That might be the case, yeah. Hi.
Hi, it's so good to have you.
Thank you so much.
I will let me repeat the most important parts of how I introduced you. So you are the founder of Enid. You were before managing director at Berkeley's Institute of Creative Entrepreneurship. And there you led the Open Music Initiative, which is like a 300+ consortium of industry folks. And the goal of the music initiative, the Open Music Initiative, was to streamline the payment and the metadata around music. So welcome to the Karajan Music Tech.
Thank you so much.
Nicola.
Thank you.
I'll get everyone else on board first, and then we talk a little bit more. We have Christopher Widauer. Christopher Widauer is an old friend of the conference. Hi, Christopher. Christopher is head of business development at NEWZIK, which is a very interesting, interactive, fully digital music notation ecosystem. And before that, Christopher was the head of digital at the Vienna State Opera. Welcome, Christopher.
Hi.
Finally, we have Alfred Taudes. Alfred Taudes is a professor at the Department of Information Systems and Operations at the University of Economics and Business in Vienna. And he's also the director of the Research Institute for Crypto Economics and the scientific director of the Austrian Blockchain Center. So welcome, Alfred.
Hello, nice to meet you all.
Nice to see you. Alfred, I want to start with you. You have recently, you have a lot of projects in the Institute, but one of the things that caught my eye was the culture token of the city of Vienna. I think this is really interesting because it is, in a way, a protocol for exchanging CO2 emission reductions that you, in your life, avoid. You get the reduction, but you avoid the CO2 emission, and in return you get tickets for cultural events. Tell us a little bit about how this idea came into being, Alfred.
Yes, thank you very much. You already gave a very precise way of explaining this. So thank you very much. Normally professors talk a lot, so I would talk for 1 hour, and it would not be as clear as that. But it's exactly that. It's what we call a purpose-driven token. So it's of course a token like Bitcoin, but instead of mining the Bitcoin, you earn the token by avoiding CO2 emissions. On one side, we have the mobile phone, and the mobile phone has many sensors, and these sensors to a high degree are now capable of recognizing what mode of transport you are using. The tram in Vienna has a very peculiar stop and go pattern, and with high probability you find out this person is using the tram, and this person is walking, this person is using a bicycle, this one is using a car.
Very interesting.
And if you have these measurements, you measure it over time, you multiply the time of your modal split of what you're doing, and over time you can track through the changes how much CO2 emissions you save. Because from the mode of transport, I simply multiply this by the CO2 emission that is known, and we have a known CO2 price. And after some time, you start to earn Vienna culture tokens. So you see on the mobile phone, of course, you have to put in effort, and this token symbolizes your effort in helping to protect the environment. And once you have earned yourself a culture token, there is a small marketplace in the app. And in this marketplace, cultural institutions are putting their offerings. So, for example, you get a free admission to a museum. You get a discount ticket for a concert. And you have the freedom, because it's a token, what you want to exchange against that. And the nice thing is, because it's a token on a blockchain, we are envisioning an open network of these purpose-driven tokens.
So this is a token that incentivizes a certain behavior in people. Alfred, I want to interrupt you here briefly, jump to Nicole, then to Christopher, and then we'll have a discussion amongst the four of us. Thank you so much. Nicole, the Open Music Initiative was started with an idea to really get more transparency into metadata and payment systems in the music industry. Is that also like a big incentive system, but not for the end consumers, but rather for the industry players? Or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of challenges of metadata and payments continue to plague the industry. They certainly were when the initiative was founded. I think that it's been this interesting push-pull, because while there certainly have been problems, and of course many of these issues led to the formation of the MLC, I think ultimately there was big institutions that could be benefited quite largely by fixing these problems, but at the same time it was many of the smaller subsidiaries that stood to gain, I think, most immediately. And so it was this question of, similar to what Alfred was saying, of aligning incentives, because the larger institutions needed to see that there was a benefit to sort of turning this very large ship, and that can take a long time, to start meeting these new technologies. And, we're starting to see that now. It's been a very slow process, but I think that we're starting to see that, where these sort of like outlier, smaller startups and artisan initiatives that were pushing for interoperability and pushing to have these, siloed, closed databases start to be able to talk to each other, that did eventually push the envelope. And I think certainly a bit slower than we hoped, but these larger institutions are also coming around. And so I think, while still much to be seen, I think that the MLC is one outgrowth of that. And I think, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more, I think what to me is more interesting is now with this sort of like explosion of talk around Web3 and protocols, I think that we're starting to see that we don't necessarily need to wait for the incumbents to jump on board. I think they will, but we can start aligning incentives between interested parties much more easily. And I think that, what Alfred was talking about this connection between culture and climate, I think is brilliant. And I think that, the founders of the initiative and those that were sort of involved at the beginning were a bit ahead of their time, quite frankly. And so I think that we're now seeing those protocols and the adoption of the protocols sort of catch up industry-wide. But a lot of what we're starting to see now was really the architecture that we were hoping for, where, you know, metadata could flow separate from payments, and you know, attribution and all of the sort of rich information that we want about the music was there available, and that payments could flow quickly and accurately. And I think that we're starting to get there.
Talking about a slow industry and incumbents coming into the space is a perfect segue to Christopher, who has told me about a very interesting project that NEWZIK is doing together with one of the big publishers of music in Austria, in Europe, and in the world. Christopher, let us in on the inside.
I just see that I saw a message on the chat that the sound is not really working, and unfortunately, I have the same experience since the whole afternoon, more or less. So it's you have on the platform there's some sound issue. Now it's better, but I don't know whether. So I think it doesn't have to do anything with our connections, not like Bas or Alfred or. Anyway, so we are not. In fact, we are not a notation software solution, but we are a solution, a very comprehensive solution for the music publishing industry, from the publisher, from the rights holder, through like libraries and orchestras, opera houses, or educational institutions like conservatories, to the end user, providing an app for iOS and web solution where you can read the music, annotate fully collaboratively, everybody connected to everybody else in one project in real time, with audio, video, annotations, what have you. This we introduced that system or this solution in Vienna State Opera, and 2 days after the first rehearsal started, I got a phone call from the Association of German Music Publishers, shouting at me, "What are you doing? It's a scandal. Where is the contract?" So from 2018 on, I started to work with all the leading publishers, be it Schott or Bärenreiter, be it Busin Hawks or Universal Music, what have you. And slowly but surely, they moved, and they draw back a little bit from their skepticism and reluctance. And now, during the past year, of course, we had a huge boost in everything that worked digitally in the music industry, especially also music publishing, which is incredibly important for the publishers to react. During that pandemic, but also already before, we started to cooperate with one specific publisher, as you said, Universal Edition in Vienna, one of the most traditional 1901, I think, founded publisher with a huge back catalog, in developing a publisher's platform, so the publishing end of it. And the Universal Edition decided for a new project, or for a new format, for a new way of publishing that is what you call disruptive. It is really, it changes the whole industry from bottom up, because until now, publishing, as like television or many other industries, required a huge lot of capital. You had to have print shops and people engraving and all the storage and the transport of paper, tons and tons of paper, production and transportation and distribution of tons and tons of paper. So that was a very capital intensive industry. Now with digital platforms, there's no capital required at all, basically. So composers can upload their music, like many are doing, to the internet, and people can use it. Still, there is a position for the publisher, which is quality control, which is kind of a filter, which is promotion, which is a huge network that publishers have built up for centuries, in fact, and connecting music production venues. So the Universal Edition is offering a platform where people composers upload their content, and they distribute it, they sell it and distribute it. Now this raises the question for NEWZIK, or this adds to the vision that I always had with NEWZIK. NEWZIK as one of potential tools, but I say let's conquer the world. Why not? What the vision is you listen to any kind of music, you want to play any kind of music, whatever you are doing. So listen to a stream, and I give you a checkbox, and you say, show me the music. And I show you the music, so the sheet music, and you click and say buy, or you click and say rent, or you get it for free, because there's lots of music out there which is for free. So if you connect that now to a publisher and to a business model of a publisher, you see that what we need is a system, and this is what I talked about with Alfred, for example, and an Austrian startup that's very much in that field. What we need is automatized processes, protocols, where I as a publisher, I as a musician, I as any type of creative personality in the music ecosystem can upload content and secure it on a blockchain, for example, but secure it, I just say secure it, and add metadata describing the digital rights that are attached to that, like print yes or no, share yes or no, screenshot yes or no, time of use, number of users. So I can have a simple method to do this, and then the user has a clicks on that. So it really, I say what I mean. You just click on it, and you set in motion the contract that is engraved in that digital asset. And this has to be combined with the physical assets, because many digital assets in the music publishing industry have at their basis a physical asset, a printed piece of music. So this is what we are heading for, to really totally disrupt this industry. And the funny thing is that we are.
Let me jump in there, Christopher. Let me jump in there, please. What you described,
just to say this,
Alfred, is this a protocol, or is this a user interface that is also possible without the protocol? What is sort of the grain of a protocol?
Well, the point is, you need for a system like that, you need an infrastructure that is accessible to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be a classical server that is under control of an organization. So you need a public blockchain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you need a blockchain that supports smart contracts. These small programs, these scripts that execute transactions. Because you immediately also want to settle the deal. You want to transfer money. And the only way to do this efficiently would be with such a kind of music token.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So once you create music, it's unique. So it's a non-fungible token. It's not exchangeable to something else. And behind this unique token is a smart contract that regulates the access and that settles the payment. Mm-hmm. Fully automatic and not under control of a particular organization. Mm-hmm. And this would be really disruptive.
And you say not under control of a particular organization. Christopher, is the goal to say you start with one publisher, you add more publishers to this blockchain then to arrive at something like what Nicola was doing with Open Music Initiative?
No, it's exactly what Alfred says. The point is to be independent of a centralized clearing entity body. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because the publisher can settle that with a credit card company. That's no problem for one publisher. What we are mm-hmm. talking about is a far more open system that is open to different, for example, legal frameworks in different countries, in China, in South America, in the US, in Europe. And that is independent from a clearing institution, and that, in my view, should also work offline. So we that's a detail, but still, it's the point is to make it independent of a clearing institution, of a clearing body like a publisher. Nevertheless, the publisher can use it as well. So he holds the rights in that case. He gets the money in that case. So that's easy. It's just the Another important point is that the central clearing institution or body would also ask for money for that. So less money is arriving at the creator.
Yes.
And by using a public clearing body or a public securitization body, more money is arriving at the creators.
Yeah,
Nicole,
you're
you want to jump in there?
I think that you're taking the PROs or CMOs out of the equation, and I think that for a variety of reasons, I think we know that that's really powerful because it's faster, it's more immediate, and there's more money flowing between the entities. I mean, I think you mentioned the buzzword NFT, and I think that what's interesting is that there's been these really slogging conversations around metadata and rights and payments, and it's so complex because of the nature of music copyrights, and then because of the sort of nature of records being kept, and et cetera, human behavior versus sort of machines, and humans getting the rights holder information down at the right time and or not, and the sort of the right accredit attribution and credits. I think that what's interesting now with examples like you're talking about, Christopher, and others that are happening, and that are sort of experimenting in the NFT space, I think that what's exciting about that is that it's starting to there's going to be this push-pull between how people want to start to release music and connect with their consumers and connect with their fans, and different ways that they actually want to get the content out there. And I think what's going to be really interesting in the next 10, 20, I mean, I know how long copyright law takes to reform, but I think that we're going to start to see cases basically push backwards sort of down the supply chain, where you're seeing the release of music in all of these different ways, and it's going to disrupt and almost kind of just circumvent the copyright conversations, where they're going to say, you know what, this is my piece of work, especially for artists that own the majority of their copyright. This is my piece of work. I'm going to release it this way. Copyright law doesn't even apply to this. And so they're going to kind of start forcing these new conversations as far as, this is how I'm now going to monetize my content. And mechanical royalties and streaming are going to still exist. They're not going to support an artist's livelihood regardless, unless you're, Taylor Swift. And I think that what's interesting is that sort of the marriage between, in open music, we mostly worked with the blockchain entities that are sort of what I call enterprise or back end, sort of the rights, the metadata, the payments, getting the right information, getting it on a blockchain, and then finding different ways, different protocols that different entities can call in and get the information they need. There's sort of this other music blockchain world that's very focused right now in the tokens and releasing in that way. And I think we're starting to see, and I think that this next sort of bubble wave is going to start paving the road between those two entities, so that some of those where there are really easy sort of callable rights holder and information that smart contracts can pull from, I think will then start to sort of connect to the ways that, through platforms like Zora, et cetera, want to pull the information. And I think that that's where we're going to start to see sort of this pushback, the same way that streaming forced us to reconsider what a copyright is and how you enforce that. And, the fact that a stream counts as a mechanical royalty based on a player piano is nuts. And so I think that it's going to force some copyright conversations to be reconsidered. And I think we're starting to see that. There's not as much talking between sort of back end and front end blockchain applications yet, but I think we're going to start seeing that the rights holder blockchain folks and the sort of direct to consumer NFT blockchain folks are going to start talking to each other a bit more. And I think there's some really interesting business cases there.
Do you think that the development that we now see in the blockchain space is something, the momentum that we see there, that it cannot be reverted anymore? Or do you think that the incumbents are going to have, it their way, and they can suppress the adoption of that technology? And that question goes to all of you three.
So just to say a word to Nicole, yes, we are having this conversation heavily. So with all the big publishers, so they see that there is a new legal framework that has to be found and has to be agreed upon on the kind of distribution, the kind of asset securitization of contractual agreements with users on many different bases. And for the blockchain, just to say what to this last question of Matthias's, I think I'm following this discussion now since 10 years, I think. So 10 years ago, I read the first time, next year the blockchain will revolutionize the music industry. And 8 years ago, I read, the music industry will never be the same because of the blockchain. And 4 years ago, I read, blockchain is disrupting the whole music industry and music distribution. Nothing of that has happened yet. So what my specific case here is a very modest one, so to speak. So as Alfred said, use the existing technology and try to build a legal framework using that technology, but not entirely disrupt the whole system, because the system has to be disrupted by the big players and not by the technology. I see the blockchain as a huge potential, as a technological basis for a disruption that happens on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the expectations that consumers and creators have is changing. And so I think that it's less about like whether this technology is going to last or not. I mean, I think that we've actually kind of seen the blockchain word disappear a lot, and it's moved to NFTs and Web3, et cetera. And I think that probably the NFT word may disappear sort of as, again as well, although who knows, we'll see. But I think that the expectations that creators and consumers have about their technology and how the technology serves them, I think that this current wave that we're in is going to change that. And so it's less about the technology. And I think sort of like what Christopher said, like it's not necessarily like blockchain first or blockchain forward, but like what do people expect of technology? And so even just sort of unlocking this idea of like, you should be able to take your audiences with you. If Instagram goes down, you shouldn't lose all of your history of followership. If YouTube, et cetera, go down, you shouldn't lose this proof of audience that you have as an artist. And I think beginning to start those conversations, or the fact that like, there's sort of this immutable record of your piece of work that is not dependent on a platform, so that like when MySpace goes down, you lose, your music, or like SoundCloud or whatever, like, sort of depending on one individual platform to have that. I think that's where sort of the power of protocols and Web3 and being able to go direct to consumer with whatever it is that you have, and being able to do that easily, I think that is powerful. And my personal hope is that sort of, message is out of the Pandora's box and can't get put back in. And I think that setting that expectation is really powerful for artists and really powerful for consumers.
What is the time frame for, let's say, the culture token? Is it already live? When do you plan to go live? Same for the music idea, the music token. Can you give us a sense?
Well, the just as we were planning to go live, Corona started. And now, because all the cultural institutions are still closed down, we are still waiting to get a definite answer when we can go live. We already selected 1,000 violinists to become the first test users. But of course, it's still planned to go live. But as long as Corona has us, it's a problem. By the way, Corona, my sons developed a platform called Webstage Music, where Austrian musicians could monetize their web streams themselves. And it's a kind of mix of streaming and crowdfunding. And there we realized this change in mindset that Nicole said. I think the musicians have to get used that it's their audience, and they can do their marketing themselves. And they can become independent of all the intermediaries and so on. And this is a learning process. And definitely, Christopher is right. Technology herself never changes anything. It must be the people who understand the new technology and understand it. And the big problem of all this blockchain is still it's not as user-friendly as the current platforms are, because you have problems with the keys and so on.
Right.
And as long as we don't solve these usability issues, we have a problem. So definitely, Christopher is right. Everybody talks about disruption, but we need evolution.
It's very interesting what you say also, because I think that when we talk about protocols and we talk about establishing of protocols, it's very often that you have a certain subsegment of all stakeholders that the protocol will ultimately, affect, sitting at the table and discussing what the actual protocol looks like. And I think it is a huge step in thinking and a huge step in operations of such a project to actually say, okay, we want to incentivize all the players that are stakeholders in this particular economy that we are looking at. And I think this is not only hard in terms of technology, because the entry hurdle has to be very low for everyone, but it's also hard in terms of how do you set up such a project and how do you actually make sure that every voice is heard and every goal is sort of baked into the incentive system.
Very right, and that's at the core of crypto economics. That's what my research institute basically does. So when we are designing such a protocol, we don't talk about technologies. We talk about stakeholders, we talk about incentives. And the nice thing of a token of a cryptocurrency is it's money, but you can program it. General money is, in fact, very dumb. You just get it and you spend it, right? But for example, the Vienna culture token, you can only spend it in a certain time. After that, it's lost, right? And
so this is also what
and the system also has public goals. So so you can decide, instead of spending your token yourself, you can give it to the city to plant a new tree. And it gets spent themselves. And this is very easy to do and very transparent to do. And the token is at the core of the system. So when we make the music token, we talk about it first about the token, not about the database. Christopher, go ahead.
Christopher.
So to answer the question, to answer Matthias's question is yes, we started to develop a proof of concept already together with NEWZIK and together with an Austrian startup, and Alfred was involved at that time also already 1.5 years ago. But now, as Alfred says, or Nicola also stressed, the important point is that all the stakeholders and all the drivers are on board. So you need for a real proof of concept, for a real realization of a project, you need also the rights holders. In that case, a publisher. And so now we have the publisher not only on board; it's the publisher side who pushes the project. So we are now preparing a proof of concept for like May or June, and trying to go live in fall, in autumn, September, October, when hopefully also the music life will come back, because at this moment, I mean, it's dead, and that's very complicated situation for everybody involved. But on the other hand, it's a good time, it's a good window in time to prepare such a project, because you are not under this enormous pressure of your daily businesses. So that's the time frame that we have.
I want to yes, Nicole, please.
Well, I'll just quickly say, because you mentioned sort of around the onboarding and development of these, that it's this really tricky balance between making something very user friendly and still understanding the power of the technology. And I think that we're seeing that with the social tokens, for example. I think artists are definitely interested in that, but the sort of encryption around like understanding your key or being able to have a transaction on chain and sort of like dealing with the cost of gas and then, et cetera, like there's this sort of thing that you either like give up or take on as far as how complicated this is. And the technology, both of you are right. The technology is not quite there for prime time. I mean, I think it's great that artists are becoming aware of it And I think that, what you both mentioned as far as having artists at the table is so important as we're designing these protocols, because I think that we look at like technology as this agnostic sort of non-human entity that's without bias, because like it's technology, it's cold, it's and we know that it's not. It's ultimately just sort of birthed out of the people who designed it. And so having artists at the table, having marginalized queer, BIPOC folks at the table, the ones that, the artists who have pushed the envelope, like, and have most often been taken out of the conversation and out of payments and out of attribution, having those people, helping to design the protocols now, I think is so incredibly important. And I think it's also going to lead to protocols and sort of a UX experience that's much more humane and much more sort of user-friendly. And so I think that, like, first designing the protocols with artists, not for artists, but with artists, and bringing those people to the table that weren't there when Web 2 and Web 1 were designed, and then figuring out how do we educate people about how to use that and make it user-friendly while still sort of honoring the parts of the technology that are important.
I want to do one last round with you guys before we open up for questions from the audience, which are coming in already via the social media channels. And I want to talk about the degree to which these new platforms and ecosystems are decentralized. I think we're coming from an industry that is highly centralized with men in the middle and gatekeepers. And we're now using technology that can actually enable a full decentralization of all aspects, including the governance of these new networks. Like, where do you see us right now in this process of moving towards full decentralization, even of government aspects? Do you think that this is something that is desirable for the music industry, in your case, as the cultural industries that you're working in? And what are some of the big challenges that we face in going down that road?
I mean, I like to look at it as almost sort of a web of nodes or networks of decentralization. So rather than having sort of like one massive decentralized ecosystem, I think that having, smaller communities that can be connected. So, certainly I think we're still quite a ways away. I mean, I think that when we look at how we actually access information, it's still through closed platforms. Like all of I'm not interfacing with too many things on open protocols. Like I still use a bank and I still use basic social media and, et cetera, et cetera. So most of my day-to-day interactions are very much on closed systems. But I think that, rather than having sort of aiming for this like one vast open, sort of the information wants to be free landscape, I think that having, encouraging communities and artist communities to start building these webs that sort of are right for them. And then I think we're going to start see interconnections between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question coming in from Felipe Cruz, which goes in that direction. I think Christopher goes in your direction. So each publisher could run their own server connected.
So just maybe also answering this question, I think that on the one hand we have this huge field of creators that are individuals and that are working for their communities and for their fans. So not for a global audience, but for smaller audiences that can be supported very much by such a system. So they can put their content online. It's nevertheless protected. They can add digital rights and smart contracts that manage payment, for example. And on the other hand, there will certainly also survive a kind of publishing industry, like Felipe Cruz's question. Yes, I think the answer there might well be a more closed usage of the open system, but closed not because of excluding somebody, but because of including somebody works on a different decision. Not on the traditional decision now, which was informed by the huge capital required, but now more by by many other aspects that make it far more open and make the discussion more open, democratize, and help assign the value that is created by the creators more towards them than towards a system where it's eaten up, not by people getting rich. So there's no music publisher driving around in his Rolls Royce with a huge cigar. That's not there. You know, it's really more the system that sucks up most of the profit.
You don't earn culture token this way, you know, with the Mercedes and the cigar.
Yeah, in fact,
Not really.
you won't get a
But
culture
you don't care.
token.
You don't care.
Christopher, no
You
culture
actually don't
tokens
care
for
about
you.
culture token.
I exclude you. You are banned from the culture token.
I'm
because
only riding my bike.
Think about this. Well, let me first answer the question from Felipe. Felipe, what you are talking about is called a permission blockchain. So there are two types of blockchains. One are permissionless, which basically means everybody who wants can join the network and operate a node. Bitcoin is such an open blockchain. There's nobody you have to ask for permission. You can set up your own server and start to mine and make transactions. But there is another class of blockchains that basically use a similar technology, and they are called permission blockchains, and they are, for example, used in supply chains where the companies want to share their information openly, and they are already used by banks. They have big consortiums because the banks also have for the interbank money transfer, and they use these permission blockchains, and they are definitely a model, as you described, basically. So this is simply called a permission blockchain, and it, of course, could be a nice model for the existing publishers to organize that. The advantage of a permission blockchain is you don't need the mining, because the mining, the energy consumption protects it. So it's faster, right? And it's in a way more smooth. On the other hand, of course, you need a contract between the node holders. In Austria, we have a public sector blockchain that works like that. And of course, in a way, it's again exclusive, right? I mean, currently you have about 10,000 servers who are securing Bitcoin, and it's really decentralized. The other one is quasi decentralized. What I envision is, I think there will be no single music token for the whole world. I mean, there is one Bitcoin for the whole world because it's very simple. In fact, it's a very, very simple token. And we currently have 7,000 tokens already on blockchains. And what I think is we will see a meta network where we have a lot of smaller networks that organize themselves for their local things. And in blockchain space, this is called a decentralized autonomous organization. And they will have open protocols. And the nice thing there is the IT infrastructure is decentralized. That's nice. The code is open source. That's, of course, the principle. But still, if you look at more complex systems, for example, in decentralized finance, you will find that they also have certain centralized aspects. For example, in governance, right? But also in terms of who decides how the software development goes. And very often you have two kinds of tokens. You have the tokens for payments and you have another token for governance. And we are still in the early phase to understand how to design such systems properly.
Yeah. Because of the humans.
Yeah, it's humans. And because
we are messy.
The problem with game theory and mechanism design is they are typically economics tools. They assume that people are rational and that you know what they will do before you design the system.
Well, in the music industry, we've shown that not to be true. We know that's not true.
Right. So in fact, you have to make a clever way of design of evolutionary system design. In fact, in a protocol that is strict, and that's the art. And still, the centralized systems, they are very user friendly and they can react very fast, right? So really beating them and beating them because they have the network effects is very hard. It only works so far with money.
I think it's quite useful to remind ourselves also that all of what we're doing right now and all of the networks that are used to support the blockchains that are out there These protocols are decentralized in nature. The TCP/IP protocol that runs the internet is a decentralized protocol. So there is a lot of value in creating a highly decentralized foundation. But then, of course, the use cases on top of that, they don't need to be decentralized themselves. And I think like the culture token is a great example. It is governed by the policies of the city of Vienna. So in itself, by definition, this doesn't have to be a fully a decentralized system with a government token that I could buy and then have a say in how the distribution is. No, it's a policy question. It's decided by the people of Vienna. And it doesn't need to be scaled also in that sense. So the 0 to 1 of Peter Thiel doesn't apply. Like, you don't have to become a market leader for this kind of token in the world, because there isn't only one city of Vienna where you want to implement the policy.
This was a very good point. And maybe in music, we also have a certain community size that likes this kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make their network safely.
Exactly.
We shall see how this all will play out, and I'm sure that this is not the last time we will be talking about tokens in the music world. I want to thank you three for joining the panel today. I want to apologize also for the sound issues we had. This is all a fluid system. I think we nevertheless succeeded in getting a meaningful conversation out there to people. And I want to now turn the attention of everyone to the next thing that will happen in the conference, and that is the live stream that we are going to have of a musical performance. And this performance is a special one because it is a live performance done with computer code. And the artist, Sam Aaron, is waiting for us on the other stream. So this one will close, but you can refresh your browser, you can refresh your YouTube streams, and jump on the next one, where I will see you all together with Sam Aaron, Sonic Pi. See you in a bit. Thank you.